who will open our discussion about living with HIV and long-term conditions. Firstly, I have Dr. Alan Winston, Professor of HIV and GU at Imperial College, who will talk about the findings around comorbidities from the POPPY study, which has been comparing people aged 50 and over with and without HIV. Secondly, we'll hear from Simon Horvat-Marcovic, who is an HIV activist and peer mentor. He will share some of the ups and downs of living with HIV and a number of the other conditions and how he tries to manage these. Finally, Victoria Brown, coordinator at Positive Health, will discuss the benefits of exercise and how we can all try to maintain good levels of fitness. After each speaker, there'll be a chance to answer some questions. If you could wait until the microphone reaches you before you start asking your question, because we're obviously recording this live, showing this live, so we need to be able to make sure that people online can hear the questions. So I'll hand over to Alan, who will start us off.
Okay, so hi everybody. It's a pleasure to be here. Thank you to Terrence Higgins for asking me. So my name's Alan Winston. I'm a clinician and a medical researcher, and I'm based at St Mary's Hospital in London. And what I'm going to be talking about is multi-morbidities, so comorbidities, but how they cluster together, which medical problems are likely to go along with each other. So the other thing is the slides. Some of the slides are in lay terms. Some of the slides I haven't changed too much, so they are in slightly scientific terms, but everything I'm going to be saying is hopefully understandable to everybody. So I apologise if some of the slides have some terms. I will talk about them, and actually some of the reasons I haven't changed them is because I don't understand all the slides either. There's some statistical slides, and I thought, well, if I don't understand it, I can't really change it, but I'll try to go through it in terms we can all understand. So firstly, I'm going to look at what different medical problems and how some of them may go together. Then secondly, I'm going to look at some of the risk factors or the associations with these clusters of comorbidities. And lastly, if we've got time, I'm going to talk about something called a comorbidity index, and that's like a mathematical equation that might help predict who's going to develop comorbidities, and something we might be able to use in clinical practice. Before I start though, another thing to say is we've heard that as people get older, they have other medical problems, and we see other medical problems in people with HIV. One of the big things are there's no real specific screening specifically for people with HIV. Most of what we do in clinical practice and what's done is based on general population studies. So screening for who's at risk of having a heart attack is all based on national population studies. There's very little data to help us manage people with HIV. And if you like, this sort of research, it's still in its quite early days, but looking forward, the reasons for it are, can this actually help us have more specific tools for people who are growing older with HIV? And actually, are there any differences for comorbidities and the risk factors in people with HIV compared to people who don't have HIV? All right, so I'm involved in the POPPY study, which is Caroline Sabin, who's an epidemiologist, a methodologist, and myself run the study. And we're going to see some results from the POPPY study looking at medical problems and how they go together. But we're not the first people in the world to do this. And in fact, this was one of the first studies. It was published in 2012, so 8 years ago. This is a French study, and I know it doesn't project too well, but the point here is people have been looking at how medical problems might cluster in people with HIV for quite a few years now. And what they saw in the circles over at the end was that the different medical problems, the way they went together, actually depended on people's weight. So people that were underweight, they tended to have the cluster of medical problems that was associated with substance abuse. I think this was a French study, and their cohort, they had a lot of people who were injecting drugs. And then they also, in the other extreme, saw a group of medical problems that went together in people that were overweight, and these problems tended to be type 2 diabetes and high blood pressure. So nothing groundbreaking or unexpected, but quite interesting to see how the different medical problems were occurring in different groups of individuals. And probably until recently, the largest data set on medical problems in people with HIV has been from a group in the United States called the Veterans Affairs Cohort, and I'll talk about this later as well. But they've looked at how different medical problems go together, and their most common one was hypertension, which is high blood pressure, and dyslipidemia, which is high cholesterol. Okay? And you can see that the next one was high cholesterol and COPD, which is the chronic bronchitis and pulmonary disease. So this is something that's been looked at by many groups around the world. But in the UK and Ireland, we have this study called the POPPY study, which is, it's a bit unfair to say it's at the UK and Ireland because it's quite London-centric. So it's quite a lot of sites in London, in Brighton, and in Dublin. But what's important about the POPPY study is there are people with HIV, and there's also people who don't have HIV, but they're from similar lifestyles. So one thing we can do is look at medical problems or the clusters of these medical problems and try to see if they are differing in people with HIV compared to the people who don't have HIV. Now, this is this entire list of all these medical problems, okay? Now, I heard at the very start that some of the other meetings you've had, and I certainly know when you look at the literature, you see a lot of scaremongering on growing old with HIV. I don't want these sorts of slides to be scaremongering. And actually, one of the big things we've seen in the POPPY study is that, yeah, there are slight differences in the number of medical problems in people with HIV compared to the control group, but actually, it's quite subtle. And the people who don't have HIV, as we heard at the very start, they have lots of medical problems too, okay? So yes, there's this big list, but remember, we are recruiting predominantly people over 50, and we're seeing this very similar list in the people who don't have HIV, okay? Now, this is one of the slides that's in statistical terms that I haven't simplified because I really don't know I don't understand it really myself, okay? But what the statisticians and methodologists have done is go to that really quite enormous list of medical problems that you've just seen and done some very nice work on which of these medical problems are associated with each other in completely non-random ways, okay? So which medical problems are good friends with each other and always seem to be going together, and which ones are far apart from each other, okay? That's my understanding of what this all means, okay? So, and there's different ways of doing it. So, the first thing, just looking at the characteristics of the POPPY cohort, this is the people with HIV, but as you just come down towards the bottom of the slide, the mean age is 52, and this is because there's an older group and a younger group. The mean age of the older group is in their mid-60s. Oh, sorry, I've flipped one too many. And you can see that people's current CD4 count is good, it's around 600. Most people have an undetectable viral load, which we know is what we see in UK clinical practice. But interestingly, a lot of people have had a low CD4 count, and a lot of people have been living with HIV for quite a long time. Now, this is important. So these results are important for people that have been living with HIV for a decade or a bit longer. And people quite often say to me, well, what do these results mean for somebody who gets HIV today or was just diagnosed with HIV last year? And I would say we may see quite different patterns, okay? And then people say to me, well, the POPI study isn't relevant for people just getting HIV today. And I say, no, it probably isn't. But there's over 100,000 people with HIV in the UK, and we need to know how to manage people that have had HIV for a decade or 2 decades. But these results are certainly more relevant to people that have been living with HIV for a longer period of time. So here's just the list of the most prevalent medical conditions, and in the sort of red is the people with HIV, and the very light blue is the people who don't have HIV. So you can see gonorrhea is the most common other medical problem we see. Depression, as in many other studies, mental health problems are common. Again, another sexually transmitted infection. And remember, dyslipidemia, that's high cholesterol. Asthma, bronchitis. This asthma bronchitis thing is one of these relatively recently recognised problems that might be slightly more common in people with HIV. But just look, remember 17% of the people who don't have HIV have some type of chest problems. Now, and this is the number of individuals with 0, 1, 2, 3, 4 or 5 medical problems, okay, the number of comorbidities. And you can see that the people with HIV tend to have a larger number of comorbidities, okay. Now, one of the slides I showed earlier were the pairs of comorbidities. Remember the American study and which ones go together. So our top one is 2 sexually transmitted infections, syphilis and gonorrhea. But as you can come down a bit, you can see that depression goes with gonorrhea, and that dyslipidemia, which is high cholesterol. So these are our duos and trios of comorbidities. But really what I want to get onto is that non-random things and how things are connected to each other. The next couple of slides just show the computer models of these non-random associations, okay? And I'm going to show you a few of these non-random models because seeing the computer pictures helps you see if there's going to be any differences between the people with HIV and the people that don't have HIV. And then I'm going to show a summary slide, which is really the one we can talk about and discuss. So I'm aware the next few slides don't really make sense, but they don't make sense to me either. They're pictures, okay? So we sort of see how the computers are working, okay? So this is one of the pictures on these non-random associations on how these medical conditions are associated with each other. So hypertension, high blood pressure is in the middle, and you can see there's quite a few conditions that it is non-randomly associated with. And this goes on, okay? This is another model of how these conditions are associated with each other. Then you can, this goes, now, this is the HIV negatives, and this is why I've shown these slides. You can see the number of lines is much less. So there's something there, that in the people with HIV, there are more associations between these different medical problems. Now, you can then, and this is still one of the complicated slides, okay? You can then categorize them and see how they fall into different clusters, which groups are going together. And this is the sort of summary slide, which is the one that I sort of understand and I'll talk about. There's these different clusters of medical problems. Now remember, before we go through this in a bit of detail, some of these clusters, we expect some clusters, okay? So we know that high blood pressure is associated with having a heart attack. So you'd expect that to cluster together. The question really is, are there clusters, are there things appearing here that haven't previously been reported in people that don't have HIV or we don't really know about? And that's really important because that could help us for monitoring in clinic and help clinical practice. So the first cluster is CVD, cardiovascular disease, and most of these are things that we would expect, okay? So we know, as I've said, that blood pressure, angina, they all go together. The next cluster is the sexually transmitted diseases, and we know as well, if somebody's got chlamydia, we need to look really hard to check they don't have other infections because they tend to go together. The next one is mental health, And again, we know that someone who's depressed might be more likely to have anxiety. But it is interesting that we see a mental health cluster in the POPI cohort. We've got a cancer cluster, and this is something that may be slightly different in people with HIV, given the historic AIDS illnesses we saw on years go by. We have this thing called a metabolic cluster, so that's like dyslipidemia is the high cholesterol, body fat changes and blood pressure. And what's interesting is that there's this other cluster at the end, which is a bit of a mismatch and hasn't really been described outside this setting. And that's a cluster mainly of chest problems. And I will come back to this later on. So we saw these clusters in the POPI study. And we thought, well, is this just happening in our study? Or can we go to another similar study and see if we see the same results? Because if you see the same results in 2 or 3 studies, then it has a lot of credence to what you're seeing. So we I'll just finish. The clusters and the people that didn't have HIV were a lot less. Okay. So we spoke to our friends in Amsterdam in the Netherlands, and they run a similar study to POPI called the HIV Cohort. And these were their medical problems. But when we looked at the clusters, I think I've got a slide, you can see that really they're all actually pretty the same in the HIV cohort as they were in the POPI study. Okay, so now I'm going to move on to what's associated with these clusters. So remember, we've got these different types of medical problems that are all going together. What we can then look at is, firstly, the risk factors for these clusters of comorbidities. Okay? Now, risk factors can be put into different groups, and they're listed here in the different groups. The first bunch of risk factors are risk factors that we can't change, okay? So none of us can modify our age, none of us can modify our ethnicity, and age, gender, ethnicity, they are risk factors. Older people and men are more likely to have heart attacks, okay? But that's something we can't change. You've then got the modifiable risk factors, okay? So your weight or your body mass index, whether you smoke, recreational drug use. And then there are the HIV sort of specific or disease risk factors. So could the duration of having HIV be a risk factor, or the lowest CD4 count, or a prior AIDS diagnosis? So there's 3 sorts of groups here. Now, when we look at the cardiovascular cluster, we see that age was associated with it. It's good to see that, because we should be seeing that factors that we know are expected to be associated with a condition are there. So that's like a positive control. Again, the body mass index thing. But we are seeing some HIV-related factors also associated with it. So it may be that duration of HIV is associated with a higher likelihood of the cardiovascular cluster. We've then got the sexually transmitted disease cluster. Well, men who have sex with men were more likely to be in this cluster, or those previously injected drugs. The mental health cluster, I won't run through everything, but what's important, we do see the HIV risk factors being associated with the mental health risk factor. The cancers, again, age, body weight, but also there are HIV risk factors here. Okay. The metabolic cluster as well had some HIV factors, and the chest one as well had both the traditional factors, but there may have been some HIV-related factors. Now, I know I'm just about up for time, so I'm going to just finish on one last thing, and this is, how do these clusters impact on how people are feeling? Okay, so this is how does somebody with a cardiovascular disease cluster, how does that impact on how they report their physical health to be, okay? And I've got a few of these. I've got physical health, I've got mental health, and some others. But what you can see is, for some of them, there's slight differences in the physical health. But what really stands out is this. Remember I said there was a sort of funny chest cluster? These individuals are reporting the poorest physical health by far, okay? Now, this is a cluster that we're not really specifically looking for in clinic. We know some people have chest problems, but we don't always think that it's the people with chest problems that have the poorer physical health and the ones we really need to be, taking action on. Looking at mental health, well, the mental health cluster is associated with poorer how someone feels from their mental health. But again, this chest one is performing, is showing the poorest mental health. The functional impairment, this one's the other way around, so the higher your score, the worse it is. But again, this chest one is coming up. And hospitalisation, again, it's the chest one that has the biggest difference. Okay. So, just to summarise, I think I've gone over time. So the comorbidity index is something that really is a big research thing for the future. So I don't think you're missing anything, okay? But the patterns of comorbidities, there are non-random associations, and they are slightly different in the people with HIV compared to the people who don't have HIV. And the association with these comorbidity clusters, they do have different risk factors. And as I've said, these sorts of work are in their early sort of stages, but we are hopeful in the future that the recognition of these clusters might help us in the way we screen and the way we manage in clinics, so that we have some more specific screening or management rather than just using the tools that are from other disease areas or out with the HIV field. So I'll move to my thank you slide. And I really want to thank, I've shown you a lot of data from the POPPY study. You can see here how many people and how many sites are involved in POPPY. And I really, really want to thank Caroline Sabin and Davide De Francesco, because this is a lot of modelling and methodology work that's gone into, so we've got these results. So look forward to your questions.
I've got two questions. Is that cheeky? Can I, or shall I just ask one?
No, you can go away.
Okay.
It's fine with me. It's up to the timekeepers.
I just noticed that most of the participants in the POPPY study were gay white men, 85%. And I just wondered, because I took part in the POPPY study, how relevant the findings are to me as a minority of those studied. Okay. And the second question is, quite a large part of the testing, I remember, was about cognitive impairment, and that doesn't appear anywhere. Well, it may do, but maybe I've missed it.
Yeah, okay. So two things. We really tried to make POPPY as relevant as possible to all people living with HIV in the UK, and we really worked hard at recruiting female participants, so thank you. We are able to do some breakdown analysis just looking at women, but the numbers become a little bit smaller. And what people keep saying, POPPY is continuing. Are we going to expand POPPY? We're not just going to expand it, but what we may do is for specific groups, try to expand the numbers in specific groups so that, to answer your question, we can get results that are more relevant to women or to other specific groups. Okay? Then your second question was, I've shown you the data here on multimorbidity. Now, in fact, earlier, last week, I sent a slide set, and I forgot it was a multimorbidity meeting, and I sent sleep and the cognitive slides. And luckily, Clive picked up this was in multimorbidity. So I'm delighted to talk again and show you all the cognitive results we have, because they're really interesting. But what I would say is they're also quite reassuring. We see slight differences, but none of this big scaremongering that's been reported from some other studies.
We have a question online about are there any indications for dementia in the POPPY study?
Okay, so this is going back to the cognitive results. So what we've seen in the overall cognitive results is that the overall brain function or cognitive function is very slightly different in people with HIV compared to the controls. It wouldn't generally be thought of as being clinically relevant. The question then is how many people have dementia or how many people fall into a category of actually having cognitive impairment. My problem with that is that the problem and my problem is that the definitions of what is dementia and who has cognitive impairment are really all quite flawed. So it's very difficult to say whether there's any clinical meaning in the difference in cognitive function between the people with HIV and the people who don't within the POPPY study. But please do ask me back, because I am happy to talk about that with 2 questions on it. So.
Where do I talk? This way. You talked about dementia. I was diagnosed in 2002 with encephalopathy, which of course is age-related dementia, and it's been maintained. I'm perfectly well with antiretrovirals. And my GP one day commented, he said he didn't really know what it was about, but I'd like to explain it. So I showed him my brain. I got a brain scan, which is very relevant to dementia. And he said to me, oh, you're very sharp, aren't you? So I mean, and it's all down to antiretrovirals. So it's quite different having something that's age-related to normal dementia.
Yeah. So I completely agree. I'm glad you've done so well. So we certainly know that some people get a dementia from HIV not on antiretroviral treatment or when antiretroviral treatment doesn't work. And with more modern treatments, when it's working, people improve very, very well. Okay. There is also another scenario where the antiretrovirals are working, so the viral load is suppressed, and there are reports that some people get some cognitive or mild dementia. In POPPY, we've been focusing much more on the latter, so people that are on treatment and undetectable and looking to see if there's any signals of differences in dementia or cognitive findings. And it's in those individuals, as I said before, we've seen subtle differences, but not massive differences. Okay.
I spent quite a lot of time at Mildmay from about 6-7 years ago.
Okay.
But, look at me, I'm okay.
Doing well, okay.
Yeah.
And I would say that we're very lucky to have Mildmay. It's the only HIV-specific neurorehabilitation centre in Europe, and it goes from strength to strength, so it's an amazing place.
Yeah, Dr. Axtell is amazing.
Yeah.
He's very, very good.
No, I completely agree.
Saved my life. I was actually sectioned because somebody misunderstood in Shropshire what I got, and they thought dementia, and I was actually diagnosed in 2006 with early onset dementia, and I was sectioned and put in a ward with 8 men. I was the only woman with lately early onset dementia in the environment. He got me out of it.
Well, I'm glad Dr. Rackstraw treated you well and you're doing so well. It's good to see you.
Final question from the online, I think. Yeah. So there was a question about, is there any indication as to what could be caused by drug side effects in the early drugs, and what is actually caused by the HIV virus itself?
Yeah, so that's a good question. So if you remember when I was showing you the different risk factors, and it came to the bottom, and we had the HIV-specific risk factors. Now, some of the things that weren't there was specific drugs. So are the older drugs a risk factor? Now, we haven't seen that in the POPPY study. That's why they weren't there. It doesn't mean that they're not risk factors, because we have roughly 1,000 people with HIV and 500 people who don't have HIV. So we may not be big enough to see those. The study may not be big enough, but certainly it's not the biggest factor that comes out. The biggest factors that were coming out were the ones that were on the slides.
Okay. Thanks, Alan.
Okay.
Okay, so I think we'll call
Thank you.
there. So thanks, Alan.
Who's next?
so, okay. Hi, thank you. I'll start off by saying I'm Simon Horvat-Marcovic. I am a peer mentor, a treatment advocate, and just a thorn in the side of bureaucracy, I think is probably the best way of putting it. And as Adrian Mole would say it, I'm 55 years old, 7 months and 25 days. 2015 was one of the hardest years of my life, and not because I was diagnosed with HIV. At the beginning of the year, I had a cancer scare. It really shook me, absolutely terrified me. Thankfully, the results came back. I was okay. It was something else diagnosed, but it was a long, long journey. I was sadly made redundant. I was then made homeless in the home I was living for 16 years. My 13-year relationship with 9 years of partnership came to an end. I became bankrupt. And in July 2015, I finally discovered why I was feeling so unwell. And that's because I had Hep C as well as HIV. Now, it wasn't a huge shock to me, but nevertheless, dealing with homelessness, a relationship breakdown, HIV, Hep C, it was extremely tough. The day I was diagnosed with HIV is also the first night I slept on the streets of Camden. It happened to be Thursday. I was sofa surfing, but the point was my friends were away. And I was lucky because it was July. But as you walk around this city, we're in the 5th biggest, richest country in the world, or 6th, or dropping now, I don't know. But the point is, more and more people are living on the streets. And we need to be aware it's not just the druggies and the drinkers. It's so many people. In this city, you are 1 month away, 1 paycheck away from the street. Actually 2, because you've got to go to get evicted and get kicked out. But the point is, 2 paychecks away. That's everybody in this room. Think about it. But no, for me, it was, living in central London, I'm dealing with so many life-changing events. I feel fortunate. I have access to services, which people in this room do. I have 5 departments of the Royal Free looking after me. I attend the Cobra Clinic in Chelsea, Westminster. I access the Bloomsbury Patient Network at Mortimer Market. 56 Dean Street, next door. David Stewart and his amazing groundbreaking take on the world of chemsex. My HIV consultant and everyone at ICDC, Royal Free, have worked hand in glove with my GP for over 20 years. I'm GP for 20 years. Point was, he retired last year without asking me, but never mind. So I'm now in the process of retraining my current GP of how to go and keep things working together. The most important thing we've got to get, we will get older, we will get things, more things happening with us, but we've got to be involved. I know people don't say, I don't want to talk to them because the receptionists will know and everything else. It's important, it's vital that you know. I know people are talking about taking 1 tablet a day. Actually, it's not 1 tablet for me. I take 3 for HIV, but that's not a problem. I started straight away, within 1 month, at an undetectable viral load, and have kept that ever since. That basically means I can't pass on my HIV to somebody else. It also means my HIV won't get worse. It's dormant in the system. Medical people can talk about it a bit better for you. But the point is, people don't realise that. Most people in their 50s, men especially, don't see their doctor. I'm lucky because what I can do is, because of my diagnosis, I am having all the different checks. I found, the list of stuff on there, about 2/3 of things I have. Not necessarily because of the HIV, but because I'm getting older and I had a bad patch of my life and I basically didn't look after myself as I should do. It's a hard struggle, but we keep on working. It's important for me also to say that if you don't engage in your treatment and your lifestyle, you're not going to get the best out of it. At the end of the day, it's up to us to go and deal with things. It's hard with the years of austerity, and we're going to get more now. We know that with the new government. It's a critical word, but never mind. But the point is also, the charities and the support networks, their funding is getting smaller and smaller and smaller. We need to work smart. You know, I've actually, in the last 2 weeks, I think I've attended meetings for different organisations, THT, yesterday was Positive UK. We don't need to be redeveloping and we don't need to be reinventing the wheel. If someone's doing this really well, great. Let's see what we can go and do. But they need to talk to each other. Because so many times I look at things listed down on the emails, oh, this is happening here, but the same day something's happening over here. We need to make sure people are working together. One big thing everybody talks about at the moment is mental health. For me, that was a major, major part of my problems. It can cause so many different things happening to you. You know, literally, you know, I was suicidal. I threatened to bite the housing officer, kill myself, and name him on my suicide note. Fact is, at that point, 2 huge bouncers at Camden Council offices escorted me off the premises. But what then happened is the mental health outreach work jumped in to start the ball rolling to go and help me, because basically, you know, as I've said, you're bound to go and have some problems and, you know, and reactions if you've got all these different things happening to you within 1 year. It's a long journey. I've had problems with medication, and it's antidepressants, not the HIV ones. I put on 15 kilos in 1 month. Last March, I was 119 kilos, or 118.9. I'm now at 100 kilos. It's slowly taking it off, having the people like the food chain talking at the back, Peter, having the food chain and help me learn what I can eat and do to make sure I can do the best for me. The DWP at the moment have decided that they're not going to, you know, that they've stopped paying me my 2/3 of my income, my benefits, because I hadn't sent the forms in. I did, they lost them. They don't admit it, but never mind. I truly believe the system is designed that basically to put people off. You go away and it's not somebody else's problem. If you live out of London, your local borough doesn't need to deal with you. If you go and don't deal with that, if you don't deal with that problem, they don't need to deal with you. Yes, they do. Out of all the people that appeal and put on things, you're going to get 70 to 80% are going to go and get their benefits back, or maybe reduced or different, but they'll get something. But think about it, 70 to 80, that means 20 to 30% is a saving of the budget. People and lives are dying. Through mental health, through physical health, for whatever. And it's going to get worse, so we've really got to be careful of that. But most importantly is, you've got to get involved with what you're doing. Now, I'll stand up and shout and talk and whatever on a good day. There are bad days when I literally completely withdraw myself away from speaking to anybody. You know, I used to be a retail manager for for a large company, and I was always on the telephone. After 10 years of being bankrupt and being of debt and people chasing me, I don't make phone calls anymore. I control the flow of information. Text messages, emails, backwards and forwards. It's hard, but it's a work in progress. I know I'm fortunate that I'm here. I know that now that someone asked me, how am I so resilient, carry on going to what I'm doing? I said, it's very simple. I am sheer bloody minded. I'm not going to let them get away with it. I wake up in pain, fine. It means I'm still here. Now that I don't want to kill myself, then I'm going to make sure that I do the best that I can. But also, if I can give a voice to somebody who can't, who hasn't got the guts to stand up and wave or are unable to go and share what's happening in their lives because their family, their background, they haven't got a support system with them, it means that I can go and help one person. That's wonderful. We live in a huge city, I don't know how many millions of people here now. 2 years back, I was involved with Town Seekers Trust during the Can't Pass It On message. 100 of us on Pride going through, 1 million people around. Awesome, wonderful day. Bit long because it's got a set delay for starting and going. But as we got to the end of Pride March, people dispersed. I was alone. I was alone inside 1 million people. Do you know somebody that you haven't seen around or haven't spoke to, or you used to go and have coffee with that person? You don't hear from them. You know, I know I have bad days. I can have 7 days, and all I spoke to is, "Hey Google" or "Alexa, turn the TV on, turn the radio on," or whatever. I get involved with the different organisations, THT, Positive UK, the food chain, Positive Health, all these things you get involved with. Outside London, it's the bigger conurbations have got organisations and charities, but you still got to go and look for it. It's not going to come to you, you have to go to it. So basically, HIV wasn't the thing that was going to kill me, it would have been me that killed me. And I'm now making sure that it won't happen, and I'm making sure, hopefully, it won't happen to other people. Okay? Any questions, anybody? Thank you. No, okay, right. I get out of it now. I'm bloddering. Yeah, go on, please, go on.
I've got a quiet voice, so you can't hear me. Right, thank you. Right, what I would say that they say old age comes with baggage. Well, it also comes with compensations, because if you live in London, you get free transport.
At the moment.
Oh, yes, I think it's possibly going to stay for a while as well. And it's more advantageous than in other places. For instance, I go down to Brighton, because I used to live in Brighton, and the age of getting a bus pass there is 65. In London, the Freedom Pass is 65, but there's a pensioner's oyster at 60. And the fact that you have free transport, it is tremendous. I get on the bus, I go to Epsom, I go to Red Hill.
I
Sometimes
understand that, but it's brilliant to do that.
And it actually makes a difference.
Yeah, it does. But for the first 2 years, I had nothing. I was the first year, all my stuff, I was sofa surfing, no home, no job, no proper benefits, because everything was in storage. My own savings was being eaten away, and I would have to walk everywhere and in pain. I was billeted out at Limehouse, at a hostel, a homeless hostel. I live in Camden. I used to walk to the Royal Free and back because I didn't have the money to actually go on the transport.
Yeah,
as with the PIP that stopped, if they stop my PIP, they will remove my Freedom Pass.
But what I'm saying is actually when you've got your pension, I've had high-level disability living allowance for many years. I got it whilst I was still working, and they used to assess me then. But once I got to pension age, I've never been assessed.
I'm 55, 7 months and 25 days. Pension is going to be moved. You're going to be 74 before you're going to have to go and retire these days. So it's hard. It's really hard.
Well, I found at 76, I've never been challenged for many years.
Yeah.
I used to.
Yeah. That is, you know, you're 20 years older than
Yeah,
me.
but
Sorry to say, but
so
that's, you know, I wouldn't say for a lady,
is
but
to reassure people that as they get older, it actually will get better.
only
Okay.
if you engage.
Well,
Thank
yes, yes. Okay.
Okay, the good news for you is going to stop me moving around too much because I won't be able to move. I do see a few familiar faces today. I normally do around here. I'm Victoria. I work at the Central YMCA where we run Positive Health, which is exercise referral for people living with HIV. We've been running it there now for 22 years, or 23 it'll be this year. I've been working there, this is my 10th anniversary this year, so it's quite exciting for me. And I'm here, I suppose I'm here as a bit of a, what can you do if you want to live well with HIV, and you're aging with HIV, but you want to live well. Down from moving on, was it? Down. Yeah, I remember these things. So I suppose I'm looking at what is the current situation, what are we currently doing in the UK levels of activity-wise, why should we exercise or do activity, and how much should you be doing? You know, they're looking at me as if, I always get this look, people are like, oh no, she's going to make us do something. I'm not going to make you do anything. And a little bit about reflections maybe from on my programme. I've just done my annual report for last year, so it's just a little bit of maybe what we've come out of the programme from last year as well. I would desperately try and keep in time, but I talk too much. So we've gone over some of these stats, so I'm just going to whiz through them, but this are, you know, what are we living with at the moment? So it is a population that we're obviously ageing, which is a very good thing. We're now living a lot longer. And we've already had the stats about living with at least one other comorbidity. So 1 in 4, 15 million currently do. And in the next 5 years, they're thinking that's going to go up to 18. So what does that mean for us? We have been quite lucky in that we've been using a lot of modern medicine to live well and to use medications to help us live with these comorbidities. But what else can we be doing? Levels of activity. So I always like to get this out, get it over and done with. So what are we not doing? We've all just sat here for 40 minutes. This is where I should make you all move now, really. People are, you know, in the UK now, we are 20% less active than we were in the 60s. And that is naturally because we now have jobs where we spend a lot of time seated, we drive cars. And I always think actually we're quite lucky. If I do this audience in London, you tend to find people in London do a lot more walking than any other parts of the country. Other parts of the country, if I did this talk, they would probably have driven here and not done any walking to get here, not even gone on public transport. But we tend to now, you know, everything modern day life is made to move less. We have everything on our phones. We don't have to go anywhere if we don't want to. Don't have to go shopping. Don't have to do anything. And current trends, we're going to be even less active by 2030. People living with long-term conditions, so there's any of the sort of long-term conditions we've been talking about, they tend to be twice as likely to be inactive than the normal population. Though 2/3 of people living with long-term conditions say they actually would like to be more active. So this is this whole thing of like they would like to be more active. How do we get people to be more active? There was a study last year, and it's from Sport England, so the slide's a bit, yeah, but this is current people, where currently last year, how inactive is the current population. So we'll go into a bit what you should be doing, but it's quite simply 150 minutes plus of activity per week. That's what you should be doing. And 63% of, just over 63% of the population are currently reaching those levels. It is more than the year before though. Actually, it's a trend that's gone up. So, oh dear. See, I've already been talking too much. It's going to go and shut down. But if you actually look at the other end of that slide, so less minutes, so nearly 25% of the population are doing less than 30 minutes activity a week. It's not a day, it's a week. So it's quite interesting to see what we should be doing, how can we be doing it? And we've got the little bit down the middle, the fairly active. Actually, when I looked a bit further into the study, women, for example, were actually less active than men. Just slightly, but they were. And we tend to think of this as going to be, this is adults actually, but for example, one of the groups that were really not very good were actually the 16 to 24-year-olds. Well, nearly half of them were not doing their activity levels. So we're here looking at comorbidities and aging, but actually the younger part of the population are also not doing very much. So it's quite interesting sort of to see those stats. So why should we be doing activity? This is why I stole this slide from a doctor, because you know they always know these things best. So in here, the quote on the top of the slide was, if exercise were a pill, it would be the most cost-effective drugs ever invented. Okay, it's because if you are physically active, and I actually will say physical activity rather than exercise. This doesn't have to mean that you need to be running a marathon, etc. But physical activity, and I'll talk about activity levels, what can it do for you? So that reduces the risk of these conditions. So this is not necessarily if you haven't already got them, but it can reduce the risk. And there's lots of things there that show this is great reasons why we should be doing it. So it's everything from risks of dementia. More commonly, you would be thinking maybe, you know, cardiovascular problems, type 2 diabetes. Some of the main forms of cancer is going to help lower your risk. Obviously bone structure, so hip fractures, we would all think that. But things like depression, I would say one of the main reasons I get people referred to the gym at the moment is because of depression. And I'm currently doing a mental health awareness course, and nearly every different form of mental health condition, one of the things they say you should be doing is exercise and activity. And as we saw your lovely slides saying, that high percentage of people that are living with HIV saying they're living with depression as well, it's definitely something we should be doing, why we should be doing it. So I just think this is where I suppose I'm supposed to be looking at the more positive side, how you can take control of some of your lives and how you can be doing things to make your lives better. It's interesting that I looked at a study, there was a study on the BBC about aging, does exercise help the aging process? And it looked at sort of, people, very extreme people, so, people that have been exercising for years that would, like, for example, they looked at a man who ran the London Marathon and he was 87. So the oldest man to run the London Marathon was 87 last year. And they were looking at, were these people abnormal, I suppose, in a way, that they were doing these extreme things, breaking world records, or were, actually how we should be. If we'd had lifestyles where we were all more hunter-gatherers, the old hunter-gatherer, should we all be more like that? Now, okay, we might not be breaking world records, but if you're looking at an 80-year-old that has the same physiology as maybe a 50-year-old who is sedentary and they've got the same physiology, it is actually the 50-year-old that is not living up to what their body should be doing. And it's not the 80-year-old that's actually this exceptional person. So it's a case of, there is an aging process and we are obviously all living through it, but you can, by doing activity, make this less of an impact than we'd like to think. These conditions aren't necessarily always going to happen to you if you can remain as active as you like. Study actually one of my colleagues brought up to me last week comes into other things as well. So I could come back. When you come back and do what you're doing, I'll come back and do eating well and maybe sleeping well and things like that, because it is a whole, if I was going to do eating well, sleeping well, not drinking, not smoking, they could all come together. I'm here to look at activity today. But actually, your lifestyle really can impact on what and how well you live. That last study, which literally the results only came out last week, looked at your, when you get to a certain age, over 50, if you're living with major chronic diseases, if you live well, your risk of, you can live for an extra 7.6 years in men, 10 years in women, if you have, compared to if you have no risk factors. So basically, living well can help reduce the risks of some of these comorbidities we've been seeing. It's not always going to be, because there are other factors that come into it, as we know, but you can still take a hand in actually helping to reduce as much as you can the risks of aging. The important things about exercise and activity. So it might be that we're also we're looking at like reduced risks of, for example, a cardiovascular disease, but more importantly, it's how well you can live later on. I know that I've been to a lot of studies recently that people have been very concerned about having to leave their homes, for example, that they can't live anymore on their own, won't be able to live independently, have to go and live in a home. So the more active you can be earlier on, and do things like, for example, building muscle. Building muscle, the only way you can really build muscle is by doing exercise and activity. It can help you live independently so that you can still go shopping on your own, that you can still do tasks you need to do. I was just boring some people earlier, that one of my clients I see tomorrow, and he's 89, he's been coming to the gym now to see me for 9 years. He still lives on his own in Camden, he still does everything on his own, independently, and that is because he's remained active. So it is very important that if you want to live well and live independently for longer, to actually do some exercise and activity. And also, exercise and activity can help combat any side effects you might be having from taking long-term medication. Long-term medication, unfortunately, sometimes the longer you take it, it will bring up these sort of side effects. So trying to counterbalance that by being active and eating and living well is very, very important. So what should you be doing? Let's get down to it, shall we? Let's have a look. Okay, so these are the NHS guidelines. 19 to 64. Now, I have actually done research to look at over 64s, because I know there are some over 64s around. They are almost identical, yes, to this. So it's 150 minutes, 2 hours, 2.5 hours of moderate intensity exercise each week. okay? This can be split down. So for example, it can be done in 10-minute slots. So if you'd walked here for 10 minutes, nice and fast, you're going to walk home for 10 minutes and you're going to do another 10 minutes, that would be your 30 minutes today. You could tick it off. Needs to be 10 minutes though. But it can be split up in the week. So actually, when you start to look at 150 minutes, split over 7 days, it's actually doable. And it doesn't have to be coming to the gym. I'm going to sell you the gym because I work in a gym. I never used to actually, but I do now work in a gym. But it can be lots of other things. If you like walking, if you like cycling, if you like swimming, if you like dancing, if you like gardening, housework, those things all come into your moderate intensity exercise. So for example, you know, there's lots of people that sort of, you know, you're going to go out and you're just going to walk from extra bus stop. You're not going to get off at your bus stop right close to your house. Those type of things can really help to get into your 150 minutes. Muscle strength exercising, you should be doing as well. And we all know that the earlier you start to build muscle, the longer it lasts. So for example, I could make you all do a sit to stand now. Stand up, sit down without down on the chair. It'd be a lovely little way for us to get some muscle strength work going. So that type of thing can be done. It doesn't have to be in a gym, but you should be doing it. And this is where you see this bit down the bottom. This is where I'm really going to make you issue. We should all be moving. So even if you decide you're going to do your half an hour right at the beginning of the day, get it done, and then you sit down for the rest of the day, please don't do that. Try to keep us active throughout the day as well. So rather than the high risk factors, people that they might go to the gym twice a week, they do it all twice a week, but they spend the rest of their time 9 hours a day stuck at a computer, not moving. So it is about looking at this sort of general picture of trying to stay active. Now, if you cannot get to this, because this is, you know, in theory, still quite a high level, only 63% of people are getting to this. And if you are over 64, the NHS, they do recommend light activity. Now, light activity is still just moving. So it can be anything. That if you're at home, you're just making sure you're not seated down in your chair the whole time. You are doing some light cleaning. If, for example, you've struggled to move with your legs, it could be that you decided you're going to do some upper body exercises. We have seated exercises, for example, at our gym. If you've got problems with your legs, you could do some walking in the water. You could do water aerobics. So there's lots of different ways of getting light activity in, but most of us just aren't moving enough, and we just need to move our bodies. So there we are. That's what we should be doing. So how is this possible? I mean, I'm sure you're all looking at me like you're probably all doing this anyway, aren't you? Yes. But if you're not, how can we sort of get you up there, to get you started doing it? So I would say my biggest thing is to start with small amounts. January, I'm just saying, the gym is slightly crazy at the moment in January. People get very enthusiastic in January. Whether they stay enthusiastic throughout the year is another matter, but they get very excited. So the idea is to start, especially if you're doing nothing, is to start slowly. The best way to put yourself off is by doing too much too quickly. So start slowly and increase it gradually. So if at the moment you can only walk for 1 or 2 minutes, fine, just walk for 1 or 2 minutes. Gradually over time, build that up. We are aiming for that goal of 30 minutes. I'll repeat it, just in case you didn't realise what it was. But it can be a gradual build-up. And activity, it could be that you do things with the upper body rather than the lower body as well. My biggest thing to you is to find something you like to do. If you love dancing, go and find a class to do dancing. If you love yoga, go and do yoga. Whatever you like to do, if you like doing it, you are more likely to stick to doing it. The one thing I always have is people say, oh, I hate the treadmill, Well, why are you on the treadmill? Because it's good for me. No, not necessarily. It's not necessarily good for you if you hate doing it, because you'll only stick to it for a certain amount of time. There is so much out there you can do. Near where you are, there's loads of classes, or even like just walking with friends, things you can find, things to do. Find something you like to do. If you like to do it, you will make time to do it. If you hate it, you will avoid doing it. Like, put it off. Try to get it into your daily routine as well. That is, and as I said, we're very lucky in London that all of you, even if you're going to take the tube or the bus, you're still going to have to walk out there and find one. If you don't have issues, take stairs instead of lifts. Don't stand on the right-hand side of the escalator. Walk up left if you can. That massive queue when you're standing there waiting for it, go up the other side. It's, much quicker as well. Get help and advice. Find someone that lots of clinics, for example, have physio departments. If you're new to exercise or you want to get back into it, come see me. I've got my details. You can all come find me at the gym. I'm just around the corner. Or go to a local gym and get some help. Don't just think that you're going to know exactly what's going on. If you want to start swimming or something, find where your local swimming lessons are, but get help. Don't feel like you're just going to need to do it on your own. Exercise with a group definitely helps. If, for example, you said to your friend, let's all go down to the local Zumba class, and you've told your friend you're going to the local Zumba class and they're going to meet you there, you're more likely to go if you've got someone that you're going to go with. Because you don't feel like you're on your own and you don't know anybody, and B, you've made that commitment with someone. Definitely listen to your body. I will say that again because it's January. If things hurt and they hurt badly and you're not quite sure why, don't keep doing the thing, but in the end you pull out your shoulder and you can't move for 6 months. Listen to what you're doing. Listen to your body. It will tell you if you're doing too much or you're not doing enough. That's the other key as well. So just listen to what it says and be patient. If you, for example, you haven't done exercise for, I'm going to say 10 years, or could be more, you are not going to be back running, the 1,500 meters in under 6 minutes in 2 weeks' time. It takes time to build exercise. Be realistic as well. If you used to play football when you were young and you loved it, but you've hurt your knee, you may not be able to go back to football. Might need to find something else to do. I would say use technology. There is a lot of it out there. Lots of it is free. You've got these wonderful apps that tell you how many steps you do. Do you know how many steps you should be doing a day? 10,000, yes. That's the guidelines. It's quite a lot when you start, mine will tell me how many I've done today. Or, definitely 10,000. But yeah, lots of apps that will tell you, monitor what you're eating, how much exercise you've done. Great ways to motivate yourself. And just keep moving. That's what I said, honestly. I've done this before and I've made people stand up. But really, you should be all standing up and do a little bit of moving for me now. But there are always things to any level you are, you can definitely do something. And it is something that you can take control of and that you know that you're putting the effort in, and it can make a big difference. Back to that slide with all those conditions that it could help with. It's definitely worth doing some activity. There we go. So this is just from for example, our program. So we have about 250 people that get referred each year. And some of the little quotes for people that have come through the program and the differences it's made. And then down the bottom, because they've got motivated to come in, because they've got people like me telling them to come in and to keep coming in, and they want to come in and do it, 100% of people that complete our program double the amount of the activity they do on a weekly basis. So it's quite simple to do and they do it. And 100% of them say that it increased their sense of well-being. So this whole thing about one of the most important things that comes out of it is that they feel better about themselves. Why should you exercise? Because you feel better about yourself. If you feel better about yourself, you're more likely to carry on doing things. The one thing people always say to me is like, I'm very tired and I don't feel like I have any energy to exercise. If you do nothing, generally, you have less energy. Even if you just do something, a small amount, it will give you more energy to do more. So definitely, people that come through our program, even if they're just coming in for once or twice a week, do see a big difference. And it's about finding that sort of thing that you can do. But it does have a big impact on your life, definitely. I think that might be my last one. Yay! So, any questions? Yes.
Can you say how much it costs to join the program?
I can, definitely. So if you come onto our program, actually the program is designed as a 12-week referral program, and it is designed to give you knowledge, confidence to go and exercise anywhere. So you don't actually have to join our gym. If you've never been there, it's just around the corner, it's lovely. But you don't have to. It's designed, if you want to then go and join a pure gym that costs you whatever, a week, month, you can. But when you're on the 12-week program where we're trying to give you as much information, you can try classes, you can go swimming, actually you get 3 free sessions a week. And if you want to pay to come and use the gyms at other times, you can pay £2.50 during the day and at weekends, and you can pay £5.50 in the evening. So most people, 3 sessions a week is actually enough for them. But if you're very eager and you want to do more, you can pay extra to come in. Once you complete the 12 weeks, if you wanted to join the membership there, we have different subsidised gym memberships. We have monthly ones. Our monthly off-peak membership is £26.50. But we also have a concessionary membership where you can pay £30 for the year and you just pay £2.50 to come and do a class, use the gym, have a swim. So yeah, thank you. It's a man who's been to the gym, you see. He knows my gym. And suffer. And do you know what? Here's an interesting example of a man that said to me on one of the first days we did the first session together. He said to me, "I hate the gym. I don't even know why I'm here. I hate the gym." And what did you say to me just a little bit? How many years ago was that, by the way?
Probably about 6, 7 years ago.
Okay. And what did you say to me? How many times are you going? He's not coming to my gym. Goes to a local gym. But how many times are you going to the gym now?
With great reluctance.
How many times?
3 times a week.
There we go. See.
Can you not tell? Don't answer that. Just don't answer that.
So a man who hated the gym and never wanted to come to the gym is now going to the gym 3 times a week. See, there we go. Yes, hi.
Hello, I'd just like to ask, thanks for the presentation.
My pleasure.
It's working. What is the criteria for referral?
Anybody living with HIV. Full stop. So you get your referral, which I have actually got some referral forms from your clinic. You just take it in. It's a very simple form. They fill it in. Or actually it can be support groups that can fill it in as well. Once we have your form, then we invite you in. You come have a look at the gym. We give you an information session. And then you get a one-to-one session with one of us. And we will give you... So, for example, that's a very personalised session. So if you tell me, for example, my main issues is I've got lower back problems, we might give you lots and lots of work to strengthen your core. Because it said very few people have weak backs. Nearly everybody has a weak core. Whatever you might tell me you want to work on, and then we have a one-to-one session, and then we'd ask you to come into the gym for up to 12 weeks, once or twice a week, normally twice, with sessions where we look at what you're doing. I'm lucky I've got a group of volunteers who are wonderful, work with me, most of whom have come through the program and are now retrained as fitness professionals. And we give you support for 12 weeks so that you can really build that nice and slow build that we're talking about, so you don't just have to rush in and learn everything in one go. And you can try classes because we have everything from, as I said, yoga all the way up to high intensity training, which if you want to do HIIT or circuit training. But it is about lots of dance classes. So if you love Zumba or you love dance classes, there's lots of things to try there as well.
This is in London only.
Yeah.
So does the YMCA operate the same as other YMCAs around the country?
Unfortunately, we are London only. When we first started, we actually did pilot this out to Manchester, and I think it even went to Brighton, way before my time. But the Positive Health Programme only works at the one there because it's funded there, and that's the one it works at. Now, saying that, there is no reason why any gym anywhere in the country should be able to provide you with a gym induction and a program. If you go to see them, you can tell them, I've got knee problems or whatever. They should be able to give you a gym program to follow. Or what you do is you come see me for a one-off session. I give you a gym program, and then you take it to wherever you are in the country and you follow that program, which is we are also happy to do. I do that for people who live miles away but still want to have that first session where they know what they feel that they can talk to me about things and tell me what they want to be doing. But yeah, it's hard to, gyms are very scary places, which is why I always say about finding other things as well if you don't like a gym. But it is important that everybody that works in a gym is a trained professional, and they should be able to give you appropriate exercises if you say to them, this is what I want to work on. But it's about you knowing as well what you want to work on. Do you want to build strength in your upper body? Do you want to, help with your lower back? Do you want to improve your flexibility? What it might be. So it's good that if you've got that, what you want to work on, then you can go to a gym and they'll help you.
Great.
Huh?
We'll call it a day there. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Stayed on.